Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested. There's so much awesome virtual reality going on, not just on the hardware side, but also on the game side. Big AAA studios working and revealing their VR games. Last week, I was able to play test a new game, completely new IP from Crytek. They're the game developers who made Crisis 2, Crisis 3, a bunch of other great first-person shooters, but the game that they've made for VR is not a shooter at all. So let's take a look at The Climb. So I'm here with Dave Bowman with Crytek, and you're introducing a new game today. It's called The Climb. Tell us briefly, what is The Climb?
So as it's indicated by the name, it is about climbing, specifically solo free rock climbing. And it allows you to do this extreme sport in the safety of your living room, which is one of the things that hasn't happened before.
And it's an interesting game also for Crytek. You guys known for making these really fast-paced action shooters. This is more of an intense solo experience that has no guns that we can see.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a outcropping from our experimentation in VR. We wanted to update our engine for VR. We started doing some tech demos, then we started getting excited about doing development. And in that development experimentation, we came up with this really simple core precept that climbing is fun. And we said, well, for VR, for this generation of VR, let's focus on actually climbing and getting that perfected. Let's make that the best possible experience we could possibly do. And that's very, very entertaining. And so it might be a different expression of what we do at Crytek, but what we're doing is really pushing one area as hard as we possibly can.
Yeah, and the thing that actually connects us most to the Crytek games I'm familiar with is the environment. It's beautiful, lush island environment, at least in this demo we're seeing, making use of the graphics engine. What's also interesting is that you're getting the player to move around in the virtual world while they're not sitting, but they're standing. And in the demo we tried here, you're playing with a gamepad. So what got you to that Locomotion solution of just using the hands to move around that world?
Well, again, it was a prototype we were doing about different forms of movement, and one of the ones that we found that felt really good and was very natural was the ability to climb. So our precept in VR is that you're going to be able to touch the world, and in order to do that, we had to get hands into there. So let's put two hands in there. We know where your head's tracking. Then let's combine those in some way in order to make it feel very natural. And so supporting the controller, left toggle for to be able to the left. Trigger in order to be able to grab with your hand, and it feels very natural, like you're grabbing something. The right hand, same thing. And now move your head, and all of a sudden you're looking and moving the hand and controlling, and that just feels very, very natural. So it was a natural growth from experimentation. That's where the fun was at. That was a simple, very intuitive interface. And it progressed from that.
Did it start basically with ladders, this vertical climbing, to the more 3D environment climbing?
It was entirely, we wanted to do verticality. We said, well, now how do we get up the surface? And the original premise was that, okay, how would a person naturally go up a surface without any kind of tools? So can we do that? We literally white boxed that. We put, very primitive, it was gray at the time, gray boxes for your hands. And then we had this really primitive surface, and we experimented with that, and we found out that was intrinsically fun. When we showed that to Oculus, to Jason, we said, hey, we're experimenting with doing this bigger project, and he identified that one spot. He said, that's actually a lot of fun. What do you guys think about focusing in on that? And so we said, yeah, actually, as our first project, we have a lot of lessons to learn about VR. Let's focus on that. And so it was a collaboration between Oculus and ourselves as far as what the nature of that game turned into. And now we've been just taking it as far as we possibly can and making it beautiful. So it started off very simple, gray box. Now it's huge and beautiful, which is what we do really well.
Is that what the big lesson from VR development is? Because everyone's learning so much. Do you just focus on the one thing, this concept, like this feels right, there's something cool here, and then push that to its limit and get that working and not kind of overwhelm the player with too many options or too many things going on?
Well, we're learning lots of lessons in VR, and at first we were overly ambitious. We were going to do the biggest, greatest thing ever in gaming. And we very quickly realized, well, we have so many things to learn. Let's figure out one core mechanic that works really, really well, polish it, iterate, get it really, really right, and then move on and do another one, and then eventually let's wrap them all together into that big epic game. And that can be years down the road because it takes, huge teams, lots of budget, lots of time to create something that is huge and epic like that. Let's make sure each piece of it works well in VR first. So this is the first thing. Climbing, we now know that you as a person who want to get from the bottom of something to the top of something have a very engaging, visceral way to do that.
Yeah, it's a big leap from like Crazy Climber, that old arcade game where you're climbing on windows and moving that joystick. Here you have controls with the gamepad where you're using the head Locomotion to direct your hands, but you're also going to have touch support?
We have touch support as well, and when the touch controllers launch, it'll be available with touch support at that moment, yes.
Now with the gamepad controller, technically, is this possible without any kind of positional tracking because you're just looking around and directing your hands?
You have to have the ability to say, I want my hand to move over there. And that's sort of a natural thing when you're climbing, that you start to move your hand. You want to move your hand to that direction. So your head moves there and you lean forward into that direction. And that, we're tracking your head motion and then applying it to the hand that's free to move. And it sounds weird when you describe it, and it's not intuitive for people on a verbal level. But when you're actually playing the game, within 2 or 3 seconds, people are already picking it up. But by the time they've done 5 or 6 of the different grips and have started going up the surface, they stop thinking about the controller in their hand. And by the time you got up to that first platform, you were worried about where you were going, not so much about how you were doing it. It becomes very natural.
How does difficulty in this game progress? Is it?
This was the easy. You saw Southeast Asia, easy environment. There's a medium and a hard. Medium becomes more technical. There's different grips. You saw 2 grips in this environment, and there's multiple paths there, but those paths were relatively well laid out as far as visibility and the ease of finding the grips that you wanted to make, and there's lots of grips available. In the medium, there's fewer grips. There's diversity in those grips. Some of them are more technical, and the lines become more challenging. The path which you want to go up above. And it's in Southeast Asia, but it's actually an entirely different geometry, a different mountain that you're climbing. And then difficult. It takes place in Southeast Asia, but we've changed a lot of the environmental factors, and it's in much more complicated routes you're going to be going on, much more technical. So you hit a crux moment where you really have to commit. There's a lot more leaping, a lot more jumping from one point to another point.
So you mentioned Southeast Asia. That's a demo we played, and you're using different geometry to kind of let players explore the level differently and have different challenges and different environments in the future, not just the naturalistic ones.
Well, yeah, what we've for this portion, for this game, for this release, we focused on making sort of the idealized portions of the real world. So Southeast Asia is not a specific location of Southeast Asia. It's sort of that picture postcard, wish you were here, idealized version of a vacation climbing area. And we have other areas we've already identified that we're already building, and we're not releasing those yet, but there's multiples, and they are set in places that you might want to visit and go climbing.
Interesting. Now, the sense of immersion and presence of using this, because I'm standing up, my feet are still planted on the ground. Yep. As you're playtesting this, do you find that people are less cognizant of the fact that they're planted in their feet? Have you experimented, for example, with people on harnesses playing this game?
Well, we want it to be in your living room. We want this to be a social experience. We want this to, there's almost a party game element because you're racing for time and for points. Mm-hmm. And so anything that we do that makes it more complicated or more abstracted from that, that environment that you're going to have at home, we think that's probably a mistake for us. So it might be interesting, and it would definitely, even if you just sit in a chair and lift your feet off the ground, you get a different feel when you're playing that game. If you're afraid of heights, you feel it in your stomach. It really does have that visceral, little bit of vertigo, the same kind of the sensation you get on a roller coaster that some people really like, and other people are like, oh, I'm not sure. But you're safe, and you know that you're safe. So being planted actually is in a way, it's a benefit, right? Because you're doing this extreme sport, this really dangerous thing, and you make a leap from one place to another, and you fall. It's kind of reassuring to have that sensation touching the ground.
I also noticed there are a lot of cues that you bring to the player in the game. For example, the heartbeat, the sweat. How, in your testing, how does that influence how the player actually feels?
Well, I don't know if you noticed it, but for a lot of the players, that they start to sweat actually in the real world on the controller. We're thinking about maybe having some chalk to actually play the game because you're really gripping, and we wanted to reflect the game conditions, the heartbeat, as you were saying, you can hear when you have been pushing a little bit too hard, and we want to sort of modulate that because we don't want to make you so. We've already made you stronger than the average person. We've made you a rock climber. We've made you somebody who can actually do things that you and I maybe can't do, which is one of the advantages of this, right? Like you get to do this amazing thing. But we want to also provide these controls that that you can't just race to the top with no consequence. And so the heartbeat is giving you information in game that feels natural, rather than put up artificial interfaces around, like have a heartbeat meter over here or something. We're trying to keep that out of there and keep the game as much as possible into space. The little bits of sweat that start to show up and the way the chalk comes off your hand as you sweat more, we think that's a better indicator of state than having these pop-up interfaces or a meter down in the bottom corner of your screen.
And how does the experience change when people are using the touch controllers? I assume you're testing with that.
Yeah, we are. The touch controllers are amazing. I mean, we love them. The gameplay is fantastic without them, but when you have them, then you have that natural eye. I reach up. I reach up with my left hand. I reach up. That is a very comfortable, intuitive experience. So I think when you combine the headset with the touch controllers, you're going to have people who are not traditional gamers have an access that they've never had before. It's just going to be very intuitive for them. And so we really, really, so far in testing, have found it to be quite not just enjoyable for us as gamers, but also for more casual users.
And then when can people expect to play the game?
As soon as the hardware is out there.
That launch window. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for chatting with us. Thank you.
So The Climb, really, really interesting. It's a game that I think is going to be best with touch controllers. It really seems like they designed this game in mind to work with Oculus Touch or some type of motion control where you're going to move your hands and grab the rocks. But it wasn't uncomfortable or uncompelling with the gamepad. In the gamepad, I was moving my head using head look to look at the grips, and the animated hands on screen, the floating hands, would shift in animation to kind of show that, oh, now when I'm looking at the right grip, it would open up and I could grab that place. And when I pressed the trigger, it would move. So it would actually take the camera control away from my head, but it felt natural, never felt dizzy, never felt uncomfortable. And it felt like a cool, almost like a puzzle game. I'm going to be exploring these environments, looking for the grips. And like they said, the different geometry and the difficulties will have fewer grips and harder difficulties. I really want to see more than just natural environments, though. It really feels like this is a game made for like the Spider-Man climbing game where you're on the side of a skyscraper and climbing up. It was also interesting that I was standing while playing this game, and my feet didn't need to do anything. It wasn't like even though they reference like the Oculus Presence experience where you're standing on the edge of a skyscraper and looking down and you feel a little bit like a vertigo. I didn't get that feeling at all with this. I almost felt like I forgot about the lower half of my body and I was just focusing on moving my head and moving the controller arms. So I'm really interested to see how this game would play out if I was suspended, if I was on some type of swing or harness where my feet are actually dangling. Would that enhance the sense of presence, having that my feet not touching the ground? Because I'm constantly reminded while playing this game that, okay, my feet are touching the ground. I'm not actually hanging. There's no strain on my arms or anything. The audio and visual cues they put in the game really helped increase the sense of tension. The heartbeat, you can actually hear if you miss a grip or if you're doing a jump and you grab, they put in the sound of your heartbeat or a heartbeat, not your exact heartbeat, to give you a sense of, oh, you're now getting more nervous. And also there was the visual sweat on the screen. The screen got a little blurrier if you were sweating. So little things like that, actually, those cues enhance the feeling of immersion. The game, I think, is really promising. Can't wait to see what they do, what the different levels they do. And like I said, I'm really interested to see more urban levels, skyscrapers, even climbing houses, villas, basically parkour, and also what this game would be like if I'm not actually I'm not standing and don't have my feet planted on the ground, but if I'm on some type of swing or harness or rope or something. And we also have a bonus interview. The head of Oculus Studio, Jason Rubin, was also at the meeting, so I got to sit down with him and chat about his experiences working with developers in making these Oculus games. So let's jump to that.
So now I'm joined by Jason Rubin, head of Oculus Studios. You work with game developers for Oculus games, right? And so what's been your experience working with game developers, including Crytek?
Yeah, my job is to bring great titles to the Oculus platform at launch and thereafter, and make sure that we push VR forward and kind of do new things and experiment. Experimentation that might not happen if Oculus didn't get out there and get involved in the community and bring best practices, finances, production expertise, and things like that. And we've had a lot of takers. When I started, I thought it was going to be a job about convincing people to develop for VR. Turns out that's actually the easiest thing I do. I just drop off a development kit, and the minute that it's in some studio, the studio immediately wants to work on it, and I end up giving them more kits, and people come up with ideas. So I spend a lot of my time working best practices, making games comfortable, making them novel and unique, kind of scoping things, and then making sure that the games actually happen.
Do you find that when you like the first wave of what developers try out all end up being very similar? Like what are the things they gravitate toward that necessarily aren't the things that you want to push for Oculus?
Well, we have a difficult challenge because we have 30 years of game development, 40 years of game development behind us as a community. And obviously, we've come up with ideas that we really like that are also extremely fun, some of which work really well in virtual reality, some of which don't. But also importantly, we've opened up an entire new realm of games that could be created that it's hard to say you have a year, go create new stuff, because it takes time to experiment and it takes time to come up with those new ideas. The Climb is one of those things that I walked into a pitch for things we think would be cool in VR. There was a slew of ideas on the table, and I just latched on to this idea of climbing. It was extremely well prototyped. It was comfortable. It was fun, and you could see the hook there immediately. On top of that, one of the demos that we had been given at Oculus that was most well received was standing at the edge of a building. So I knew that people really liked the immersion and liked the presence that VR brings, liked that kind of butterflies in your stomach moment when you're looking out over the edge. Here was a title that could bring that to the gamer, to the community, but also offered a really compelling gameplay. So we decided to kind of focus on this, and Crytek was extremely excited to kind of get going and focus on that one specific idea and flesh it out into something that's a wide-ranging, compelling gameplay experience.
Yeah, when you say one idea, you really mean like one mechanic that's different. You could have an analog to it all the way back to the old arcade games, climbing, but it's something that is experienced differently in VR. Internally, are you trying those different mechanics, things that are departures from traditional, desktop gaming or console gaming?
Yeah, by one mechanic, I'm not trying to narrow it down. Madden is one mechanic, a first-person shooter, excellent game, one effective mechanic. What's hard to do in the amount of time that we had between when our development kits first went out and when launch happens is something that's much broader, a Grand Theft Auto, if you will, that has to handle running and shooting, diving out of planes, driving, flying cars, fistfights. It's very hard to put together that scope in a short amount of time. So we focused on one mechanic, but then figured out all the fun things we could do with that mechanic.
Is that also about easing a new audience into experiences that they haven't had before? When you give them one idea and go far with that, and then later on kind of iterate over that. Is that how you see progression of game development in VR?
I think the audience is capable of handling anything you throw at them. I have a huge amount of respect for the gamer. You give them something and they will either like it or not like it, but they will experiment with anything. The one thing that VR brings to the table that hasn't been there in the past is comfort and discomfort. You can actually feel uncomfortable in VR. It has to do with the same forces that make you uncomfortable on a boat or in the backseat of a car. It's nothing odd or in any way misunderstood. It's just something that exists. So a lot of experimentation, a lot of time and a lot of energy goes into making things comfortable. In general, that means less movement, less locomotion, but not always. And in fact, in the Climb, you're climbing a mountain, so there's locomotion, and you're doing things like grabbing handholds and going around pillars that in general you would think would never work in VR. But in fact, with enough time and experimentation, you can create something very compelling that does that is comfortable. And you played the Climb yourself. How'd you feel?
Yeah, no, it felt great. And even though I felt I had a sense of agency, even though the transition, the animation from letting go of the trigger to the Climb is the camera taking out of control of my head, right, but it was still comfortable. And so you're kind kind of pushing those boundaries, and there are no fixed rules, I guess.
Right. Yeah. The goal is to give you the agency of being there and give you the urgency of being on the edge of a cliff without giving you the discomfort from movement. And that is a very fine line. If we take away either the agency or the feeling that you're actually there, it's easy not to give you discomfort, but to give you that sense of immersion and that sense of presence while simultaneously not making you feel in any way discomforted, that's the technology that Crytek has come up with. And it's fantastic. And each team that's out there is doing their own bit to kind of get there. When I started, sniper rifles are not going to work. We have sniper rifles. When I started doing a game that's steered by your head, so you fly like that, that's just not going to work. Well, it works. And Uncharted 2 is one of the highest rated Gear VR games now. Yeah. So just going out and figuring out the fringes of what works and what doesn't work with an eye to keeping things at the end very comfortable has led to a lot broader a width of things that we can do than we thought initially.
You talk about movement being one of the potential factors of discomfort. What about duration? What are you finding in your play testing and in talking to developers? How long are people wearing the consumer version, the near final version of the Rift in their games?
I don't think we have a final answer on that. I will say there's a lot of misinformation that comes from earlier development kits and past experiences in VR that aren't borne out by the final technology that we're bringing out. And I think some of our competitors are bringing out. So I do believe longer than what people fear will be bite-sized experiences are going to be possible. If I go to a theme park, there are rides that I could ride infinitely. There are also rides like the Mad Teacup or a roller coaster that I wouldn't want to do for 2 hours. VR gives you that agency. It gives you presence. So if you have a very high energy, extremely charged experience, well, that may be something that you can't do for a huge amount of time. If, on the other hand, you create something that's a little more slow moving, doesn't require a lot of arm motion with the touch controllers and physical exertion that would make you tired in the real world, I do believe that multi-hour gameplay will be not only possible, but will be something that a lot of gamers do partake in. And I think that there will be a lot of range there in between. I'd also say there are best practices there. If you have a very bright game, for example, it's Arctic whiteout snow, that's tiring on the eyes, just as it is to be at a beach without sunglasses. Yeah. Can't put sunglasses on under VR. So a lot of the things that you hear batted around, oh, VR is going to be short time, oh, VR can do this, is either based on old information or a lack of information and a lack of foresight. I think we'll know this over time, but I do believe that there's going to be a range from short duration things to long duration things.
It's more informed by the game design than the hardware itself and the potential of what VR is.
Absolutely. There are games that I can foresee that you will create in the next year that people will play for hours at a time without either eye exertion or other exertion. It may not be the climb if you're playing it with touch controllers and you're moving your arms around a lot. There are limits to how long people can lift things over their shoulders in the real world that play in the game. However, they've timed the game with that in mind, and they've created checkpoints and level lengths that make sense for that.
You guys are shipping with an Xbox controller, and Touch is going to come out after the original headset release. In working with developers, are you pushing them to make experiences that are going to be great for both? Games that kind of you play once, and then when Touch comes out, you kind of re-experience it? Or is there a balance there? Are there trade-offs there?
Well, both is the rare case. This is a rare case of a game that plays incredibly well on gamepad. You tried it, and also is an obvious winner on touch. In general, people are tending to make a decision between the two. Again, I don't think we really know the final outcome for controllers. What I will say is the Xbox One controller is kind of the child of the child of the child of the child of the perfect breeding down to a perfect controller for the human figure. I mean, you can just grab that controller, and if you're a gamer, you know exactly where the buttons are. It feels comfortable for long gameplay sessions, and it's incredibly multifunctional. It's a fantastic controller. It doesn't give you hands in space. It doesn't do some of the things Touch does, but it's an incredibly good controller. I know there's a world of seeing your hands in VR that's incredibly powerful, and Touch controllers prove that out. But I also believe that there's a world of playing longer games, and again, not getting yourself tired, sitting down and playing with a controller like the Xbox One controller that are also incredibly viable. I also think there's control schemes we haven't seen yet. And I think there are things that people are going to be experimenting with controllers that we don't know yet. So I think VR at its infancy, we can't really predict where things are going. But what I do know is the Xbox One controller is an absolutely fantastic controller for a wide variety of games. And it made sense to put one in the box. When people bring home their touch controllers, I don't think they're giving up the Xbox One controller for a lot of titles. I truly believe that that controller has its place in the future.
And the same applies, that kind of balance also applies to whether you have a sitting experience or a standing one or a walking around experience as well.
That's right. Absolutely. The seated experiences are going to last longer. They're not as tiring. It's the same as the real world. Standing experiences give you a little bit more feeling of presence if you're not in a cockpit that makes sense to be sitting down. They give you a little bit more range with your touch controllers. They give you abilities that you don't have sitting down. So we're pushing both experiences. We think they're both valuable. I would guess the seated experiences will be longer experiences than standing ones for obvious reasons, but we really don't know that either. There very well may be somebody that comes up with a standing gamepad controlled experience like the Climb that ends up being incredibly comfortable for a long time.
What has surprised you most in working with developers? Like, is it when someone like Crytek comes to you and finds a mechanic that you latch onto, or what are the things that get you excited about VR development?
Yeah, I'm surprised every day. I've been making games for 30 years. I've never seen the pace of innovation happen faster. I've never seen a moment in which the opportunities open to the development community versus what exists currently has been so broad at the end and small now. I mean, we have a very small number of games that we've experimented with, but in the face of what I think VR can give us, opening up all dimensions as opposed to a 2D television. And also games have become larger. They take more time now. They take more people now. Projects that take 2 or 3 years, and in VR space, a year is an incredible amount of innovation. So you have this inherent conflict between technology moving incredibly fast and large games taking an amazing amount of time. So it's going to be interesting as that plays out and we settle down a little, but I think it'll take a few years. And every day I see something new, either on the internet or somebody brings it to me and say, oh, we should have thought of that. It's obviously that's the way you do whatever it is that you do. And I'm surprised.
Yeah, we love being surprised as well. Thank you so much, Jason, for chatting with us.